this is one example that really stands out to me that I want to get into. With season 3, and we have Dougie versus Mr. C, I think this comment from etc. points out this duality quite well. He even mentions the ego and the transcendent. Okay? We're shown this. So I want to read his comment real quick. In season 3, I think we see a perfectly black Cooper and a perfectly white Cooper, Mr. C, and Dougie. While Mr. C is a master of manipulation, brute force, and animalistic desire, Dougie has no ego and is directed by transcendental forces of good, manifested as luck or synchronicity, always leading him to those close to him, to abundance and love. So we are shown a stark contrast, obviously, between Mr. C and the childlike Dougie, which plainly illustrates the self-induced pain and suffering by the ego with all of its complications, contrivances, and efforts to prop up the false sense of self or illusory imago or self-image that most of us desperately try to maintain, versus Dougie here, who, without any effort whatsoever, is able to be showered with abundance of earthly riches, but more importantly and foundationally, is in touch with the eternal bliss of the source of existence, where ego and the self really doesn't need to exist. Okay, the storage, right? The conversion and the storage process isn't so much there. It's there somewhat. You do have a storage of Dougie. You do have the... So the point is, we do have a manifest form of Dougie, but he doesn't have to be so firmly seated in his false sense of self. In fact, he has no... So we're seeing two different extremes here, right? Somewhere between these extremes, most of us are dwelling, of course, between Mr. C and Dougie. Look at how serious, though, Mr. C is. Look at his face. Look at his... You know, as Bill Hicks say, look at my furrows of worry. This has to be real. Look at my big bank account. And then, of course, you have Dougie just walking around. Okay. Now, in the casino, I love this scene. It's just completely effortless for Dougie as he wins jackpot after jackpot. Okay. The message here is quite clear. Bliss is easy. It takes no effort at all. It always happens at every moment. It's all around. It's fully accessible. It's just a natural state of being throughout the universe. This is something, for me, I would definitely say meditation has helped me cultivate. And I would encourage anyone watching this. I talk about this all the time. I cannot repeat this enough. You need to meditate. You need to do a daily practice of meditation and really, really just let your mind do what it wants to do naturally and see what happens. It's just incredible. The level of bliss that you can come into is amazing. So here we have Dougie, and then contrasted with these people that are obviously, they're Mr. C, or they're on the Mr. C spectrum, right? These silly little egos concerned with the illusion of the false self. And they're running all around doing this and that, even going to great effort and expense to try and create conditions. In our own lives, we run around creating these conditions where we can relax and escape our self-imposed hectic lives, only to, completely miss the effortless and blissful eternal now that is always with us. So we're elevating like, well, this moment in the future is going to be better than this one. So I'm going to, not experience bliss now, but I'm going to defer it to later, and this, all this kind of nonsense, this hamster wheel of just nonsensical illusion that we kind of just seem to want to run on. And it's just getting nuttier by the minute, right? So we can miss this effortless and blissful eternal now that's always with us, okay? With the passing of every cloud, with the sight and smell of every flower, the feeling of the sun on your face, all this cringe stuff these days, right? The sound of the wind through the trees, we can miss so much that life has to offer, okay? And so this is what we're being shown here. Now, this business of the ego getting in between our bliss and our lower self, or getting between the Dougie and the Mr. C, right, is a recurring theme in Twin Peaks. We see all these characters that are most characters are in between. So the ego always seems to be at odds with everything, including the image of itself. Or at least whenever the ego catches a glimpse of itself, or what it perceives as itself, which is merely an illusory image, such as the recurring theme of doppelgangers in Twin Peaks, it seems to be pointing at something much closer related to reality than we could possibly believe on first inspection. So this doppelganger business, or the double goer, as the literal translation from German is put, this represents the eidolon and the daemon pair of beings, and I'm going to get into this, or a very old notion that curiously seems to appear in nearly every known culture, this idea of two distinct beings somehow connected to one manifest body. And this is something that author Anthony Peake has explored in great detail in several books. I'm going to reference one of his books, The Daemon, A Guide to Your Extraordinary Secret Self, because in this book, Peake takes a surprisingly scientific approach and contends that throughout human cultures, there seems to be a notion of the self as being two beings in one. You have the eidolon, which is your manifest body, the stored body, the silo, okay? And you have your body and mind kind of locked in this physical form. That's the eidolon. And the daemon. The daemon is a sort of I guess maybe more light being, a ghost in the machine, or the non-physical entity which inhabits a parallel plane of existence that is unbounded by space and time, and yet is still very much you. Okay? It may even account for the sense that you have that inside of yourself and deep down in your spirit, you don't feel your age at all. You feel this eternal sense. Your body feels a certain age, but your eternal sense doesn't. And you have there's this tug of war, or there's this fight between, right, the body, the silo, the eidolon, and you're conflicted because you have this eternal sense within yourself. So there's this conflict, and everyone's worried about dying, right? And because if you're convinced that this is all there is, and the transmission, conversion, storage theme that repeats throughout everything, that repeats throughout the world over and over and over again, if you think it's going to stop with you, well, you may want to rethink that. Okay? Now, such a notion of this like dual pair makes sense if you consider that everything in the observable reality we inhabit does seem very much dualistic in nature. Everywhere we look, reality seems to operate in pairs of what appear to be opposites. Okay, we have birth and death, day and night, hot and cold, etc. And while it's plainly obvious to say that each of these polar opposites, or twin peaks, we may call them, are really just aspects of the same system or being. Okay? Now, you'd really need to read this book to understand, like, all of the details, of course. Okay? And, yes, the rest of this video may seem quite wackadoodle in regards to Twin Peaks and the theory I'm talking about. But to some of you who have this have looked into this kind of doppelganger stuff, or have thought about this duality of the soul and the body, it's really not that scary. So the master key to what Lynch is pointing at in Twin Peaks, at least another master key, really seems to be contained in this book here. And this book has countless examples taken from some of the most influential artists of the modern era, such as Jean Cocteau, who's a massive influence on the work of David Lynch in Twin Peaks. He wrote about another presence or aspect. He spoke about an aspect of himself that he could easily be interpreted as some sort of guardian angel that was always there with him, a double self. And according to Peake in the book, that presence is your daemon, or the aspect of you, the aspect of your being that exists with you and is part of you, like the unconscious side of you, for example, but is a distinct aspect of your being that mostly you're unaware of. And I can't emphasize enough how much impact this book has had on me and how much of Anthony Peake's work reveals the man behind the curtain in terms of understanding the true inspiration for the work of David Lynch, at least when we're talking about this sense of self. Okay, and many comparisons between the work of Jean Cocteau and David Lynch have been made before, but not in the way that I'm making.